Hi everyone, this is Hey Stella with Mihaela. I don't have so much that I want to talk about this week, which is a little bit scary because I thought that I would never shut up. And this morning, for some reason, I can't think of anything that I want to talk about. The one thing that I actually remember that I heard, which kind of made me think, and I wanted to just reply. I heard somebody say when asked about method, and this person is considering himself to be an expert in method technique. He was asked of its origin. He was asked of actors who use it. He was asked of some of the exercises like sensory work, animal exercise. And he talked about it in a general way, much less than what I've been describing and demonstrating over the last couple of episodes. And what kind of took me by surprise was the fact that when he was asked if he thinks that method technique or method acting is beneficial or can it be used for other professionals, for other people other than actors. And he said, no, no, because, for example, and he starts to give an example to why it cannot be used, which is completely wrong. It is completely wrong. I wish I had that person's phone number so I can call him up and say, stop giving the wrong information. Please do not give the wrong information. He was giving an example by saying, oh, for example, you and I are having a conversation right now while that was the situation in which he was finding himself in, where he was having a conversation on a podcast. He was a guest. And you and I are doing the conversation back and forth. We don't need to use method acting because we are being real. Method acting and method technique provides tools and exercises for people to be real. And you and I, in this conversation on the podcast, we are real. What kind of an example is that? First of all, it makes no sense because the realness that you present on a podcast in having a conversation with someone is a format of superficial exchange of words. That realness is only the top layer of the actor's job and actor's work, which is to go and scratch that, penetrate to that first level, which is the conversation, which are the words, which is the easiest that anybody can do, memorize, let's say, words when it comes to actors, because that's what people kind of associate with acting, is that, oh, actors have to learn words and it's so difficult to memorize words and text and dialogue. And that is the least of their work. So that realness that he was referring to in the way that he was having a conversation during a podcast interview, that is only the surface. The actors have to go down, they have to dig, and they have to put that facade. Those words are the facade. Those words are what we say at the end, when everything else is being found, when there's so much that's going on with you, the actor portraying the character, when there's so much that you discover about yourself that you're even blown away by it because you didn't even know that kind of self-awareness, you didn't even know that you have so much underneath this facade of words, that you have so much that needs to come out. And when all of that needs to come out and it starts to bubble and it starts to bubble and it starts to bubble, that's when the words happen. That's why they're being the last to go to for great actors. Those are the last tools which will express everything that you have dug inside of yourself and brought up to the surface and then expressed through the words. So for him to give an example of, oh, method is not necessary for any other people, because we are usually very real as people, as ourselves. The real that he's referring to as ourselves is not enough for actors, because that would be boring to the spectators. If I'm going to act and if I'm going to portray and to do every role that I get to do, for example, let's say I get a role every week, and every week I'm going to bring to you the words of the script, and I'm going to be the real me that you see here. This is the real me in having a podcast, in having a conversation that I hope will get to as many people and more people. I'm being real this morning as I'm talking. I'm being real as I'm trying to come up with a subject of this episode. And now I'm like really happy that I was able to come up with something, which is the misunderstanding of the real, which is this natural kind of medium, alert, nothing really too exaggerated, nothing that's surprising. That is one level of being real, which is not enough to portray a character that has 2 hours in a film or on stage, but is as complex as any human being with a whole life. So how do you portray in 2 hours a character that's a complex human being if you're just going to keep that character for 2 hours real at the surface level like I am right now? You will get bored. You will get bored even after 10 minutes if there's nothing else to be brought up to the surface, if there are no other nuances, if you're not going to see what is underneath the words and why those words are coming out. Those words are coming out to communicate something that is happening inside of you. Those words come out in a script or in a play written because there's something that you want from another person, and you are going about it in using the words to finally say what it is that you are experiencing. So the experience, the living moment to moment has to happen, so then you can transmit in the words as the last thing that you have to worry about when portraying a character. So for somebody to say method acting or method technique cannot be used for any other things, it's not true. It's so far from the truth. And I just wish that experts would just stay in their aisle, in their box of knowledge, and talk about the things that they know rather than about things that they think they know. Just makes me so upset because I feel like I'm the only person on this planet who actually realizes what I'm trying to say. And I can't, sometimes I feel like I wish I had more articulate language to be able to explain it, but I hope you do get it. There was this 60-minute that I watched. I don't know if you guys watch it. It's actually a very good show on television. It's every Sunday, and I usually watch it because they have very interesting presentations, and it's mostly about events that happen in the world, or they introduce people, leaders in different fields. And I was very impressed by this one segment out of the 3 where CNN reporter Anderson Cooper was interviewing an Israeli historian, philosopher, professor, author. The first book that I had no knowledge of until a couple of days ago that he wrote is called Sapiens. And having read a little bit about him and now getting the book because I'm so curious about it, because of the interview that he gave, was again one of those moments that seemed to happen to me, that I seem to have, where, going back to what I said earlier in the question, does method, technique, does acting benefit outside of the professionals, storytellers, actors? And this guy who at first is, you would think, far away from anything having to do with acting, starts talking about how many years ago his husband, he's been with for about 20 years, was paying attention to the lessons he teaches in Israel, and his husband was looking at the lessons that he was preparing for his students as he was going to go and teach them. And the husband, whom I found out later after the interview, looking up more information on the two of them, was a director of theater. So his husband was a director of theater, looks at his lessons that his boyfriend, husband is preparing for the classroom for the students, and says to him, you've got to put this in a book. This needs to be shared outside of the classroom. This is much more than what you think it to be, which are just lessons for the particular classes where the students are taking history and philosophy. This is bigger than that, because he was a creative mind as a director of theater, director, creativity. So he understood that the stories that he was telling, these lessons that he was talking about, were not something that other people have not talked about before, but in the way that he was telling them, they were new. The presentation of them was new. And that's what makes work original. That's what makes work authentic. It's not that you come up with a new story that nobody else has lived or nobody else has ever heard before or seen before in movies or on stage, but it's your way of interpreting and your way of presenting it that is new. That's what makes the work authentic and original. So to see that this creative mind, the boyfriend, looks at the lessons and says, you have to write a book about it. And that goes on to become the book, the first book that he wrote, called Sapiens. And speaking about some of the way that he went to work on that book, he talks about the fact that at one point in one of the chapters, I haven't read the book yet, but I'm so eager to, but he talks about the fact that at one point he has a person from the past in a meeting with somebody from the future. So it's, again, the creative mind in this historian philosopher is bringing all audiences to become fans, because he's not just a simple everyday historian that talks about what happened in the past, what he thinks the future is going to be like. By putting the presentation of the book in a way where he engages audiences by using his imagination, he opens the imagination of other people who care more about than just history lessons. And I'm just so eager to read the book, because he talks about what's going to happen 100 years from now, what's going to happen 30 years from now, what is all this technology and the data that the big companies like Facebook and Amazon and Instagram and all these big powerful people, what are they going to do with all the data that they have on us? And what are they going to do if they decide that they want to use it for bad and not just for good? Because technology, he says, can do a lot of great things, but at the same time, if in the wrong hands, it can turn and it can be manipulative unless you become self-aware, unless you start to self-observe and to become more mindful of who you are and what your capacity and capabilities are as a human being, and take ownership and become the master of your own instrument, the same way that actors talk about their instrument and have talked about their instrument since Stanislavski for at least 100 and some years. So he's sharing the importance of self-awareness. He's sharing the importance now more than ever of our personal being and the observer in us, that self-observation as something that can stop all of the data that's being taken in the wrong hands or by people who want to control and have power, for us to be able to fight against it and to stand up for our individuality. I don't know what other profession more than acting teaches that. I really don't. Again, not just because it is teaching you to be a great actor. It is because it teaches you before being a great actor to be a great, I don't mean a great, like everything is fine and everything is wonderful and that's great, to be an understanding human being when it comes to who you are, what triggers what emotions, what to be careful about in the face of having a lot of triggers being sparked, manipulated, stimulated. How do you react to that? Do you know? Are you stopping and are you saying, oh, due to the fact that I have to understand human behavior as an actor, then I have to understand my human behavior, not just that of the character that I'm portraying? What does that mean if I'm watching something on television and a commercial comes on and it triggers the sense of taste, and they have this watery food that I love the most, that you can even savor it without being able to taste it? What does that do to me? Mihaela, for example, it makes me want to get up, go to the refrigerator or go to my phone and order a cheeseburger that's greasy and it has on it everything that you're not supposed to eat because it's not good for you. If I know that that's what that commercial on television triggers, because I have already analyzed the character in a script or in a play, or a character that one of my students that I work with had to deal with. They had to deal with food, and they had to deal with maybe bulimia, which is the disease when you eat and you eat and you eat as much as you can and then you make yourself throw up, which I had when I was, my God, I forgot, which I had when I was in high school. Didn't even know at that time what it was. But now that I'm watching these, I'm watching the Princess Diana on CNN, the story, and it kind of reminded me of myself having it. But if you were to talk about and analyze a character that's dealing with the food, with the eating disorder, which now there's so much more that's being known about it. And my student is working on such a character, I can have also understanding because I just happen to have had to deal with it. So I can have my own insight into it from what I had experienced. But at the same time, if I would not have gone through it, then you do a lot of research about it, the emotional background, because usually it's emotions that bring that up to the surface. And it's something that you can control. It makes you feel like you're controlling in your life. But when the rest of the things in your life seem out of control, what I'm trying to say is that what I want to take from this interview with this philosopher, historian, who, when asked the question, well, you're talking about the future, but aren't historians supposed to talk about the past? And he says historians talk about change. They talk about change. It was so remarkable. It was so remarkable. But again, to have this amazing person be understood at first of how much bigger his lessons were than just for the classroom because of a creative person that happened to be his partner, his husband, to develop that into a book. And then from that, for him to now be read by all the people in the world and do what he believes he is doing to change and to give us a way of thinking again a little bit more about the importance of self-awareness and mindfulness. And it goes back to acting, because that's what we nonstop try to figure out how to do better, how to understand our humanity, how to analyze our being, how to analyze our human behavior. Can method acting be beneficial in other situations, in other professions than actors? Yes, man. Yes, so much. People are using it without knowing that they're using it. Thank you so much.